Yeah.
Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. So welcome to another episode of ANZ Salesforce Podcast. So today I have with me a very special guest, Jimmy Hesketh, to talk about a very important topic. And I believe most of the people are interested to know about this topic as well. That should you be learning Salesforce in 2023? Now, you must be wondering, right, why I'm doing this topic. Because I often get a lot of questions around, from people from a different user group across the world, though, not really only from New Zealand, that what's the best way you can get into Salesforce, or should I be learning Salesforce in 2023? So I thought, I can bring someone who's really very talented, uh, who is very passionate about the Salesforce, and Jimmy is a Salesforce technical architect. So I thought, we kind of do this as a ritual, pretty much for the past couple of years. So I thought he's the best person to come and talk about this topic. So welcome to my show today, mate.
Awesome. Thank you, Vickers. Great to be here.
Oh, you're most welcome. So how's your 2022 been so far?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been busy but it's been interesting in the Salesforce space with the seasonal releases and seeing new features come out. So it's been quite exciting.
That's awesome. So coming to the main question, do you recommend someone learning Salesforce in 2023?
Yeah, I think here in New Zealand, from what I've heard in the industry, talking to people, it does seem like things might slow down a bit next year. But I think if you're someone that's interested in the space and getting into Salesforce, you should absolutely get started on the journey. Even if things are a bit slower and it takes a little bit longer to get into your first role, I think if this is something you want to do, you should start doing it.
Yeah, I kind of agree to that. I have seen that, things have slowed down a bit, especially for the past few months. But that being said, right, most of the companies in New Zealand, especially the government agencies, they use Salesforce extensively. So I guess there might be always an opportunity for someone to, jump in and start cracking with it. So that's cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Even if there is a recession and stuff, right? That doesn't mean that not every company will still be hiring. So there's probably still going to be stuff out there. It might just be, a bit harder.
Yeah, that's true. And also one more thing, right? Salesforce keep on acquiring different clouds, right? So they did MuleSoft in the past, they did Slack, then they keep on acquiring more stuff. So that kind of shows to me that Salesforce is pretty serious about, getting stuff together, and especially they're pretty big on integration, right? So,
Mhm.
you can integrate with different systems and kind of stuff. That's cool. Now, do you have any special feature you love on Salesforce Space? I do agree, right? We have different clouds, as I mentioned, right? But coming to the core platform,
Mm.
do you have any specific feature you think, oh, this is my favorite feature. I can work on it every day.
Yeah, that's quite a hard question actually. Yeah, like there's loads of great features, but probably the one that jumped straight to my head when you said that was probably external services, but doing integration. Like in the past, in the early days when I was working on the Salesforce platform, often you'd write a whole bunch of boilerplate code to do an integration for like really simple little integrations and stuff, which takes a bit of time and kind of was a bit of a pain and stuff. But yeah, with external services now that you can create a flow and basically point it, add a Swagger file and you get an external service generated and you can reference that in your flow or even in code now as well. Yeah, it's awesome. I think it's probably my favorite feature this year.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah.
I do like external services as well. It kind of simplifies the integration a lot, right? You don't really have to write Apex code to do that, I guess.
Yeah,
That,
it's just yeah, the speed you can deliver an integration is just massively increased. It's good for those simple cases. I mean, there's probably still a lot of good use cases to use Apex for complex like enterprise integration and stuff. But yeah, I think for those simple little integrations that you often need on projects, external services is great. Yeah, it's a great feature.
Yeah, and one more thing, I'm not sure if you noticed, Salesforce has changed the name credential look and feel. They kind of because
Yeah.
last time when I was playing with external services, I like, that looks a bit different, the name credentials.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So they finally moved it to the Lightning experience. I think it used to have like a classic look and feel, right?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
that's cool. That's cool. That's interesting, right? I mean, a lot of exciting functionalities you can find in Salesforce. Uh, Now, do you wish a specific feature that the Salesforce should have implemented, but but it's not there in the platform at this stage?
There's, there's probably lots of like small features and stuff. You know, you go on the idea exchange, you can see ideas for different things from 13 years ago and stuff that'll be very useful. But probably one that's probably not directly answering your question, but one thing I would be quite keen to see would be actually starting to consolidate some of those low code tools like Flow and OmniScript, for example.
Right.
I know that at the moment they kind of target different use cases and stuff. Yeah, I know, on the project one, there was kind of a little bit of confusion about when you used one or the other and, what are the differences between them and stuff. It would be pretty cool if we could start to consolidate some of the different automation tools in Salesforce. Just for simplicity's sake. But yeah, I think that's probably the main one. Other than that, I think there's a lot of stuff on like the idea exchange, right? Where, it's kind of nice to have features across the platform with different objects like activities and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excuse me. That's right. And coming to the OmniScript, right? If most of the people who are listening to us today, if they're not sure what OmniStudio is, it's a part of a Velocity package, right? Where Salesforce, it's mostly for industry cloud, right? You can build solutions for industry cloud, and the interesting thing about Velocity or OmniStudio is that you don't really have to write code to build solutions. Like it automatically compiles to LWC behind the scene. But that being said, right, I've seen scenario where you do have to write LWC code to do complex stuff. So yeah, I mean that would be great feature to have, right? I mean to consolidating all the local tools, to work with the flows. So that would be awesome, in my opinion.
Yeah. I imagine it's a lot easier said than done, right? I guess they're
Yeah,
acquisitions with their own code base and stuff. But yeah, I guess for like a simplicity's sake, right? Yeah, it would be quite nice just to have a single low code tool that you can use across the platform for lots of different use cases. But yeah, it's just nice to have, really.
yeah, that makes sense. Now, the podcast is mostly about beginners, right? Now, as I mentioned earlier, that Salesforce have acquired a lot of clouds, a lot of different stuff. Like they have Marketing Cloud, they have Industry Cloud, MuleSoft integration is there in place. Slack they have acquired. Now, for a beginner, right? When someone looks at Salesforce ecosystem, they holy moly, this is way too complicated. Where do I start? Right? That's the first question that often goes in people's mind. Like when I started for the first looking at a Salesforce, I looked at a Salesforce 10 years ago, when it wasn't classic. And I'll be honest with you, I hated the interface, the good old classic. But back in the days, right, you have limited options. You don't have to learn so many stuff. So now coming to this main topic, where do I start, right? Do you think admin is the best place to start learning Salesforce?
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah, like you say, there's so many products now and acquisitions and stuff. I think it's pretty exciting for people, right? It means that you've got lots of different tools that you can choose to specialize in based on what you enjoy or what you like. But yeah, I still think that admin's probably the best starting block for beginners.
Yeah,
Just so that you get that sort of general overview of the core platform, which Salesforce Sales and Service Cloud, for example. Um, and then yeah, I guess as you work in the industry, you'll probably get exposure to different products and get the opportunity to try different clouds and see what ones you enjoy and whether you want to, further your learning into those areas.
Yeah, that's make total sense because I remember I had a conversation with my older daughter. I mean, I said to her, hey, you can look at the Salesforce, right? Once you go to universities, you can, if you want to do business. So, but she said, nah, I don't want to do Salesforce. It's all code heavy and kind of, the kind of impression people get, right? Oh, it's a tech stack, right? So I'm not a tech person. Then I have to tell her, you can be a business analyst, right? I mean, people don't really have to code. You can choose admin part, you can choose consulting part. You don't really need to know how to write a piece of a code, right? You can do a lot of other aspects in Salesforce, which makes this product really exciting to get into.
Yeah, totally. Like it's a common, I think, misconception is you need to be a developer, you need to write code in order to work on the platform. But yeah, you're totally right. With Salesforce, you can, there's all types of different roles, even like product owners for Salesforce,
Yeah,
project management, all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, and another thing I would say that in New Zealand, we really have a shortage of really skilled Salesforce people. I mean, I'm not going to spin the controversy by saying that statement, but I'm just saying, based on my experience, even you might have seen, right? I mean, I've worked with extremely talented people, but at the same time, you know what I mean? So I guess it's a great opportunity for people, to get into Salesforce, really passionate about it and see, right, where the journey leads to. Who knows, they could be, we can build an amazing ecosystem here and a lot of great products coming out of it, or great solutions, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess in New Zealand, there's probably, there's a lot of more junior people, but I guess, we all start out as junior at some point, right? It's probably a
Yeah,
good thing because it means that we'll have a lot of senior people, in 4 or 5 years, hopefully those people stay in the space and stuff. And yeah, the whole skill level across the community will increase.
yeah, that's right. And also you can transfer the skills, right, from other tech, right? If you are someone from SAP or from a different tech stack, you can look at the Salesforce to see if that really works for you, right? I mean, someone, because usually, it's not always the case that someone, a new grad wants to get into Salesforce. There might be also be a scenario where a guy with 10 years experience wanted a career change, right? Maybe a person is working with SAP and say, look, I don't want to deal with SAP anymore. I wanted to do something else. So Salesforce might be another tech stack where they can have a look at it and see how that goes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the core concepts of the platform will, be quite natural for someone that's got a background in technology or similar type products like SAP or
Yeah,
Microsoft Dynamics even. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, let's shift the gear a bit, right? Let's talk about Salesforce programming, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go
Now,
for it.
now this obviously, right? I mean, Salesforce is do want to sell most of the products as a low code, right? For instance, we have flows. Um, but that being said, right, we have something called Apex, and you can also code in um, JavaScript. So now coming to Apex, especially Apex, do you think it's easy to learn Apex, or let me rephrase it, right? Can a Salesforce admin uh, learn Apex and become a developer? Is that an easy journey, or do you think it can be could be a bumpy ride?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a difficult one actually. I suppose, I came from a C sharp background and I think there was still probably a bit of a learning curve to going to Apex, right? Like there's a few like Salesforce specific concepts you kind of had to learn and things you had to get across, like governor limits and stuff. I
Right.
think for an admin without a software development background, it's definitely going to be more difficult for them. But I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't learn Apex if they're really determined and that's something they really want to do. I think the key thing would just be, showing up every day, learning, having an open mind. It'll probably be challenging or quite challenging along the way, but yeah, I mean, the end result would be, probably worth it. So yeah, it probably really depends on the person. I think it will be harder for an admin who doesn't have any development experience, but or any development background or computer science background. But still, I think it's possible. It's definitely possible. There's definitely a lot of people that have transitioned from admin to developer. And some of the things in like flow, it's kind of, like flow in my mind is almost like an abstraction of a lot of the concepts you have in Apex. So things like variables and like data structures and controls and stuff. A lot of that's kind of similar concepts to how you write code in Apex. So I think there's probably a little bit of crossover that might help if you've got a really strong understanding of flow. Might be a little bit easier to transition into Apex.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, since you touched on flows, right? The flows are, yes, that's true that flows looks like a low-code tool. Similar, like, there's a programming language which is an open source called Scratch. I think it's got an MIT license, I guess. So it kind of reminds me of that tool, right? When I first saw flow, but still, you're right. It involves the concept of variables, loops, right? If else conditions, and and then abstraction, right? Whether you should be using subflows or whether you should be using, a main flow. And also, in flow, we have something called invocable Apex, right? Which lets you call Apex code, or also you can put the LWC component on top of it. So yeah, so I do get it, right. It can be a bit overwhelming for an admin who's using flow for the first time. Yeah, flows are useful if if you don't have any programming experience. You can do a lot of basic stuff, right? Creating a screen flow or record trigger flows. But when it gets way too complicated, right, then in my personal opinion, I guess having a programming experience might be a little bit of understanding how the stuff works might be useful, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think having a little bit of a background, like even just like a basic understanding of programming, probably does help with flows and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the coding best practices apply to flows as well. Like things like not doing a query in a for loop. That's something that applies in both Apex and flow. So like there's probably a lot of crossover between the two.
Yeah.
And then also, I guess now things like making subflows, the ability to make reusable kind of modular flows that you can call from other flows and pass inputs to. It's almost like a method in some ways. So yeah, I think there's probably a lot of, there's a lot of crossover between the two. So I think, yeah, basic programming would be quite helpful when it comes to flow creation and your understanding of how a flow works.
Yeah, that's right. And another aspect to that as well, right? If you're writing a flow, right, you just have to assume that, things can go wrong. So I've seen that when someone tries to write the flow for the first time, they almost forget about including an error condition to it, right? For instance, things can go wrong when you try to update an entry into the database. So how do you capture it? Obviously, you need to have a fault line which captures the error, right? Otherwise, it's just a confusing journey for a user as well as a developer to figure out what's going on behind the scene, right?
Totally, yeah. And same thing with code, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
in code you kind of need like your try catch to, if
Yeah.
something breaks in your code, you need to catch it, and that's a similar concept in flow. You need to make sure you've got flow fault lines for those, important things like doing DML on a record or something like that.
Yeah, that's totally right. Totally right. So that's cool. Do you wish that there's one feature in Apex, Salesforce should have implemented, and something you would have wished, oh, I would love to have this functionality from C#, I could have used, but anything you can think about?
I guess like the real time like I know that Salesforce has a real-time debugger, which you
Yeah,
have to pay for, and now they've got the log debugger as well. And I get that it's quite difficult to do real-time debugging because it's all in the cloud, multi-tenant. Um, but it is something that I still miss, right? Is like I think the real-time debugger you can buy, you get like a single thread, and I think it's quite expensive.
yeah,
It would be amazing to be able to just real-time debug code. But in
yeah.
saying that, I understand why it's difficult. And the log debugger is not too bad, right? Like you can generate a debug log and then you can replay it
Yeah.
through the real time log debugger, and then you can kind of step through your code. So yeah, that's probably the main one that pops into my head.
Yeah, I do miss that as well, right? I mean, I did a lot of work with C sharp in the past. I started with the C, C, and when I was 10-year-old, I wrote my first basic code. So I realized we have come a long way ahead in terms of tech stack. But yeah, that's right. This is one of the things I do miss as well. When something goes wrong, just having that luxury to get into an IDE without a log file to step through the code. But yeah, the log file does a pretty good job. One thing, though, I would say that I missed the most in Apex is the concept of, generics. Like, how we have list of, the list of string you can do. But, like in C sharp, we have list of T, where T could be anything. You can pass a class instance, you can pass any data type. I mean, I've actually, I've seen a lot of requests for that functionality to be getting built, but I'm not sure what's the complication, because behind the scene, I guess it's compiled to Java code anyway. So, but yeah, but that's one of the things I really wish the Salesforce to implement. But that being said, right, Salesforce, releases pretty amazing features every, like 3 times a year. So I'm pretty impressed with the stuff they're doing. It's just that some of the stuff they kind of miss out. Maybe, that's not in the priority. Could be.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, over the last few years, like the developer experience has gotten way better as well on the platform.
Yep.
So hopefully that's something that's coming.
Yeah, that's true. Now, coming to the user group, right? Now, obviously, if someone wants to, get into Salesforce, do you think user groups plays an important role, at least to, for someone to go and attend to see, what these people are even talking about, if they if they even wanted to get into the Salesforce space?
Yeah, totally. I love user groups, right? Like they're a great way to meet people in the industry. And also, I kind of feel like when you're learning, you kind of just want to surround yourself with as much, as much sort of content on that topic as possible. So, like going to a user group and then talking with people about Salesforce, hearing them talk about Salesforce features, um, meeting people. I think that's awesome. It's a good way to learn more about the community, kind of learn about what different companies are doing with Salesforce, and probably helps you speed up the learning process as well, because you kind of, you get more exposure to more ideas. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, I
that's
think it's fantastic. Yeah, I'd highly recommend any beginner to go to their local user group and check it out.
Yeah, I guess in New Zealand, right, we got Auckland, we have one in Wellington, and I guess in Christchurch as well, right, on your side of the world.
Yeah.
So South Island. So yeah, I mean, I did a talk on Christchurch user group online, but so I kind of, to be honest, I live in Palmerston North, but I kind of like the Christchurch user group more than the North Island one. But yeah, it's great. I mean, you get to meet, great people, right? Works on different stuff, and which is great in my opinion. Now, one question I would like to ask, this is a bit of curveball question. I mean, if you don't want it to answer, you don't have to. I mean, now, Salesforce, you might have heard like a lot of people getting certified, which is great in my opinion. Certifications are great, like, uh, but I kind of believe, right? I mean, it's that Salesforce is more these days. We are more people are more driven towards the cert numbers. So and everyone talks about the certification, which is great. But Do you think that Salesforce needs to reshift this focus from a certification driven to a value driven?
Yeah, like personally, like I think all the certs I've ever done, and like they've all taught me something. So I think there's definitely value in the
Yeah,
certifications, right? But I think, yeah, I think there is some cases where maybe the focus is too heavily shifted on the number,
yeah,
versus somebody's skill set and their experience and stuff, which obviously I think is probably more valuable. But yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one. It's a tricky question. Um, yeah, I think at the moment, there's a lot of certifications, and I feel like that's probably justified given there's so many different Salesforce products out there.
yeah,
And I guess the cert is to validate that you have knowledge on the topic. So I think they do a pretty good job of that. But yeah, I mean, it is possible for people that don't have experience to get lots of certifications, and then I feel like that can set up an unrealistic expectation of those people on what they can do, right? And in some ways, I kind of feel that that's probably detrimental to the individual.
yeah, yeah,
Because if you have 8 certifications and you get thrown in as a senior consultant at that company, um, or let's say 10 certifications, you get thrown as a senior consultant, and you've got no experience, that's probably going to be quite a difficult position for you to be in. So yeah, I feel like maybe there is maybe a little bit too much focus on number of certs, and maybe there's a perception that number of certs means the person has lots of experience, which probably
yeah,
isn't always the case. Yeah,
yeah. I kind of get it. I mean, I agree with that as well, right? I mean, I, I've seen certain scenarios where, someone with like 2 years experience getting, architect certification, but just they assume that they become an architect, and that kind of surprises me because, I mean, I came from an old school, concept, right, where you work your way up to an architecture level, because obviously you cannot be an architect unless you have done something, you have realized, how the system fails, if you haven't, troubleshooted complex scenarios, right? Yes, certification will give you an opportunity to understand the platform, but the real life scenarios often varies, right? I mean, when it
so
comes to
yeah,
challenges and other aspects to it. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah,
Like I think there's probably no, personally, this is my view, right? Some people might not agree, but personally, I think there's no better like education tool than experience, right? Like
yeah,
actually doing
yeah,
stuff, making mistakes, breaking things. I think you learn quickly that way, right? Um,
yeah,
and certs are good, but I feel like sometimes maybe people obsess on them, and perhaps just study the content, so almost like rote learn the content and then go and do a multi-choice exam, and then
yeah,
then people see the certification badge on their profile and their CV or whatever, and assume that they've got experience in a particular topic. So yeah, I don't think there's any kind of easy, like
yeah,
there's kind of no real fix for that. I don't think it's probably more just as people in the space kind of get more familiar with what certifications actually are, they're kind of just validating like
yeah,
theory knowledge, which is a bit different from actual, you know, real life
yeah.
doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you just said. The only thing I would say that, right? I mean, if someone wants to get into the Salesforce space, it's great to get certification, right? You
Oh,
can
yeah.
go and
Yeah.
you can get 20 certs if you like, but the only thing, I would say that the expectation, you need to have a realistic expectation, right? Just because, you got 20 cert doesn't mean that someone will hire you as a technical architect, right? They obviously look at your previous experience, the projects you worked on. It's good to have, 20 certs, right? At least that shows you have some understanding of the core platform. But yeah, but when if you haven't, yeah, but if this applies to someone, I would say, with no experience, prior to Salesforce, right? But if you are coming from an SAP background, like 10 years experience, then you have 20 Salesforce cert, you can, I would say that you can work as a tech architect, because obviously if you have an architecture experience in other domain, it's easy to transfer those skills to Salesforce as well, I guess.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much covered our discussion today. I hope those who listen to us might find this valuable, because I realize, right, it's like a ritual what we do, right? Last year we did it, and this year we did. Hopefully, maybe next year we might do it. So yeah, so that's pretty much I wanted to cover today. Thank you so much, mate, for your time. I
Awesome.
really appreciate it. It's early morning, so I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
All good. Thanks, Vickers.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Bye.
Bye.